Hello everyone, it's great to see you again on the channel today. Continuing the turbulent journey of single mother Ly Hoai Ca and police officer Hùng, their story has now reached another turning point. In the previous episode, faced with pressure and threats from Hung's mother, Hoai Ca once thought about walking away. Yet, through Hung's steadfast love and sincere words, she chose to stay, holding his hand to move forward together. It seemed that happiness was finally within reach, but life is never predictable. Suddenly, Tony, their little boy, was struck by a persistent high fever, forcing them to rush him to the hospital in panic. The sound of the heart monitor echoed steadily, while the doctor's eyes grew serious. Preliminary results revealed that Tony might have a rare illness, with no clear treatment plan yet. Will this illness still leave a path to recovery? Will Hoai Ca and Hung hold on to each other, or will the storm tear them apart? Stay tuned for today's episode to see how they face this challenge together. Tony curled up on the small bed, his breathing heavy as if the heat of the fever was pressing down on him. Hoai Ca had tried everything, changing cool towels again and again, massaging his arms and legs, spoon-feeding him warm water, but only a few hours later, his temperature would spike again, burning hot. Mrs. Ha was just as anxious, quietly washing towels and wiping her grandson's body. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes never lost that shadow of worry. The little house was silent, save for the ticking clock and the labored breaths of the child. Each time Hoai Ca touched her son's forehead, her heart clenched. She was both worried and afraid, the helplessness weighing on her chest like a heavy stone. At that moment, Hung stopped by. The instant he stepped inside, his eyes went straight to Tony, and he immediately realized how serious things were. Without hesitation, he decided to take both Hoai Ca and Tony to the hospital in the middle of the night. On the way, the wind rushed through the car window, yet sweat still streamed down Hoai Ca's forehead from the tension. At the hospital, doctors quickly began their examination. The initial results left everyone stunned. Tony showed signs of a rare chromosomal disorder. Because of its complexity, the hospital needed to take blood samples and run multiple specialized tests to send for consultation. The doctor said it would take a few days to reach a final conclusion. While waiting, they prescribed fever-reducing medication and carefully instructed them on how to care for Tony to prevent complications. Hoai Ca held her son tightly, her heart filled with unease, hoping that every pill, every sip of warm water could bring him some relief, until a ray of hope might emerge from the results to come. When the doctor mentioned a rare illness, Hoai Ca froze. Her throat tightened, her heartbeat raced, and her trembling hands clasped together. In her mind, hundreds of questions swirled, yet none had an answer. Only one fear consumed her entirely, losing her child. Hung stood beside her, his eyes following every tear that slid down her face. He loved Tony as if the boy were his own flesh and blood, and the sight of him lying frail in that hospital bed pierced his heart. The more he looked at Hoai Ca, the deeper the ache grew. He couldn't understand why misfortune kept finding her, and in that moment, he wished he could shoulder every ounce of her pain so she could finally live in peace. The two left the hospital in silence. Night had fallen, and the yellow streetlights cast long shadows across the road, reflecting on their weary faces. They stopped by a small pharmacy, receiving from the pharmacist a neatly wrapped bag of medicine along with careful instructions. Back home, Hoai Ca hurried to prepare warm water, giving Tony each pill exactly as the doctor prescribed. The room was quiet, filled only with the faint clink of a spoon against a glass and the weak breaths of the child. The two adults sat close by, their eyes never leaving him, as if pouring every drop of hope and love they had into the wait for the test results to return. Back home, Hoai Ca immediately carried Tony into the room and laid him down on the small bed covered with a thin blanket. His forehead was burning hot, his breaths short and rapid as if he had just run a long distance. She quickly took the medicine prescribed by the doctor and gave it to him with a few sips of warm water. Within minutes, his temperature began to drop, his features slowly relaxed, and his lips curved into a faint, weary smile. He even managed a few playful words that eased his mother's heart. But that relief didn't last. Just a few hours later, when the medicine's effect wore off, the fever returned, fierce and sudden, like a storm breaking in clear skies. Tony whimpered softly, his cheeks flushed red, his little body radiating heat. Frantic, Hoai Ca swapped out cool towels, wiped his forehead, and rubbed his hands and feet, her eyes taut with tension like a violin string on the verge of snapping. Mrs. Ha couldn't sit still either. She paced back and forth, washing towels, carrying basins of water, muttering her worries under her breath as she worked. The whole house sank into a heavy silence, where each of Tony's breaths seemed like the ticking of a clock, endlessly counting down to the day the test results would arrive. Anyone looking at Tony now couldn't help but feel a deep ache in their heart. The small, frail boy lay amidst a pile of blankets and pillows, his eyes barely open as if he no longer had the strength to lift his lids. Some might wish they could take on all his pain, bear it in his place, just so Tony could run and play like other children. But fate never allows such trades. And cruelly, the one burdened with the illness was this innocent little boy. From that day on, Hùng rarely left Hoai Ca's house. He stayed close, sometimes changing cool towels, sometimes feeding Tony spoonfuls of thin porridge, and sometimes gently helping him sit up to take his medicine. Though tired, he kept his voice warm and steady, trying to comfort both mother and child. Whenever Hoai Ca faltered or her eyes drifted away in worry, Hùng would give her shoulder a reassuring squeeze, as if to say, "I'm here. You and your son will never be alone." To him, Tony wasn't just Hoai Ca's son, he was like a part of his own flesh and blood, a reason for him to stand stronger, fight harder, and be willing to do anything to protect them. The hospital said it would take 3 more days to get the test results. 3 days might sound short, but for Hoai Ca and Hùng, it felt endless, every hour, every minute stretched thin by worry. Tony remained lethargic, only a little alert when the fever medicine took effect, before slipping back into a state of exhaustion and burning heat. Each time she laid a hand on her son's forehead, Hoai Ca felt as though her own heart was scorching with the same heat. She and Hùng took turns staying awake, wiping him down, changing cool towels, feeding him porridge, giving him medicine. Yet no matter what they did, the fever clung on like a relentless whirlpool, dragging all 3 of them deeper into helplessness. But beyond the fear for her son's health, another storm was silently building inside Hoai Ca: money. Her finances had already been tight, and now, the mere mention from the doctor of long-term treatment, or high costs, made her throat go dry. The thought that Tony might need specialized medication or prolonged hospitalization left her breathless. Hùng could see it. He didn't say much, just quietly took Hoai Ca's hand in his, holding it firmly so she would know that no matter how many hardships lay ahead, he would be right there beside her, never letting go. Mrs. Ha had always regarded Tony as her own flesh and blood. To her, Hoai Ca was no different from a daughter, and Tony was the precious little grandson who needed her protection. Seeing Hoai Ca worn down by worry, she felt both compassion for her and heartache for the boy. Each time Tony's temperature spiked, she didn't stop at administering fever medicine. She tried everything she could think of, from folk remedies and herbal baths to steam treatments with ginger and lemongrass, even wiping him down with warm water infused with medicinal herbs. But every effort proved powerless against this illness. It was as if the heat smoldering inside the boy's body could not be extinguished. Tony's health declined with each passing day. At first, he still managed to eat a few spoonfuls of porridge, but soon his appetite vanished. Even the dishes that once made him squeal with delight no longer tempted him. In their place came soft whimpers, restless tossing, and half-closed eyes glistening with fever. Inside the small house, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. Everyone wished the 3-day wait for the test results would pass quickly, but every minute dragged on like an hour. Their worry wasn't only because Tony was too young to endure a prolonged illness, but also because of the invisible fear of the worst that could happen. Tony cried without pause, his voice weak, yet sharp enough to twist Hoai Ca's heart. Each time she soothed him, she bit her lip hard to hold back tears, knowing she had to stay strong, at least in front of him, even though inside, she felt so exhausted it was hard to breathe. While Hùng was helping Hoai Ca change the cool towels and feed Tony spoonfuls of thin porridge, the sudden ring of his phone shattered the stillness. Seeing the caller ID, his eyes dimmed slightly. It was his superior. A deep, steady voice, tinged with concern, came through the line. The investigation into his mother had made progress. Ever since she had approached Hoai Ca with ill intentions, Hùng had reported the entire incident. Since then, the police had quietly set up surveillance, securing the area around Hoai Ca's house as a precaution. After days of patient observation, they had finally uncovered a lead. Hung's mother was hiding in a secluded roadside inn on the outskirts of town. The tactical team had already drawn up a plan to arrest her, but his superior wanted to give her one last chance, a chance to surrender on her own. And the only person who might be able to make that happen was Hùng. "If you join us, there's a chance she'll listen," the superior said, his tone both firm and laced with empathy. Those words clenched tight around Hung's chest. He knew all too well that his mother had gone too far, yet deep down, he still wished she could take a step back and avoid the worst possible fate. He thanked his superior for considering his position, then stood up with resolve. Turning to Hoai Ca, Hùng gave only a few brief instructions, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and determination. Then he left for the station. In the meeting room, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn bowstring. A map of the area lay spread across the table, and tactical options were discussed one by one, each designed to minimize disruption to nearby residents while giving Hùng the best chance to reach his mother. This was the final opportunity, not just to apprehend a suspect, but to salvage what little remained of a broken bond. Hùng drew a deep breath, his fist tightening. He knew that the meeting to come could change everything. The endless 3 days finally came to an end. That morning, the hospital called, asking Hoai Ca to come in for the results. On the way there, her heart pounded relentlessly, her palms slick with sweat. Hope and fear clashed within her chest like two waves colliding, each surge threatening to overwhelm her. The sheet of paper, covered in numbers and medical terms, rested in her hands, yet to Hoai Ca it felt as heavy as a boulder. As her eyes scanned the final lines, her vision blurred, her throat tightened. Tears broke free, unstoppable. It was as if the world around her had gone silent, leaving only the thundering beat of her heart and the rush of pain rising inside her. She didn't want to believe it was true, didn't want to accept that Tony, her small, precious boy, had to bear such a cruel illness. Every bright future she had imagined for him dissolved, replaced by a thick fog of uncertainty and fear. Her trembling hands clutched the test results tightly. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink into blurred streaks. In that moment, she wished for nothing more than to take on all the pain herself, so her son could live in peace, just like any other child. ChatGPT said. "So, what will Tony's medical results ultimately reveal? Will that rare chromosomal disorder still hold a glimmer of hope for treatment, or will it mark the beginning of a grueling journey with no clear end in sight?" Meanwhile, the operation to capture Hung's mother is entering its most critical phase. As both a son and a police officer, will Hùng have the strength to persuade her to turn herself in, to preserve the last bit of light left in her life? Or will events take a different turn, one far harsher and more unpredictable? Everything still lies ahead. Stay tuned for the next episode to find out whether Hoai Ca and Tony can find peace, or if they will have to face yet another storm quietly gathering on the horizon.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện về mẹ đơn thân Ly Hoai Ca và cảnh sát Hùng nha mọi người. Như mọi người cũng đã biết thì ở trong tập trước Ly Hoai Ca và cảnh sát Hùng đã cùng nhau trải qua rất là nhiều khó khăn. Thậm chí Hoài Ca còn đã tính từ bỏ tình yêu này, nhưng mà với sự chân thành và cảm động từ phía Hùng thì hai người đã quay lại với nhau. Tưởng chừng là hạnh phúc sẽ đến với hai người nhưng không. Một biến cố rất là lớn đã xảy ra, đó là Tony, con trai của Hoài Ca thì hiện tại là đang bị mắc bệnh. Tony thì không phải là con ruột của Hùng, Tony là con của Đô á mọi người. Nhưng mà Hùng vẫn yêu thương Tony như chính con ruột của mình. Thì cả hai đã đưa Tony đến bệnh viện để kiểm tra. Tuy nhiên do bệnh tình, căn bệnh này rất là lạ nên là cần thêm thời gian để kiểm tra và xét nghiệm. Thì bác sĩ đã hẹn 3 ngày sau có kết quả, và đã có kết quả rồi. Tuy nhiên chúng ta vẫn chưa biết được là bệnh tình Tony như thế nào. Hãy đón xem vào tập sau để biết thêm chi tiết mọi người nhé.